Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Common and Chef here with Tom Castleman. It's Conference Championship Week. Championship Sunday, as they say. AFC Championship game, NFC Championship game. We got the two best quarterbacks in the world, Mahomes versus Burrow. We have maybe the two best defenses going head-to-head. Eagles, Niners. We got Purdy. We got Hurts. We have all sorts of great stuff. Tom, this might be the most wide open conference championship week of all time. Honestly, all four teams all have a legitimate chance to win. All four teams could win the big game. Both games should be close. There is less than a 3-point favorite in both games. They're almost pick'ems. Almost pick'ems. Yeah. It's going to be super close. Before we dive into those matchups, I mean, we'll break them down. Better offense, better defense, better intangibles. We'll make our picks. We'll have betting locks of the week, sports trivia, plenty more. But also, first we'll start with recapping this past weekend's game so we can take a look at, how these teams are going into these matchups. I'm really pumped, actually, man. I'm pumped. You know me. I was just kind of telling you off air. Chiefs plus money in the playoffs at Arrowhead Stadium. Mahomes on one leg. I don't care. Chiefs plus money. You know where I'm going. I'll be honest, Tom. I'm not sure where you're going in the Chiefs-Bengals game. I can't wait to find out. We'll tease that for maybe 15, 20 minutes down the road. First, let's go over this past weekend's games.
Absolutely. Yeah, obviously you mentioned what we have as the matchups, but I think there's two games, let's do like a quick recap. Two games in particular that I think were especially impressive, and it's kind of, which one was more impressive? I mean, we have the Eagles absolutely beating down the New York Giants, who came out, had an upset win in Minnesota on the road, go into Philadelphia, a game where earlier in the season, Philadelphia blew out New York. Last game of the season with New York not even really trying, resting some key starters. Eagles won that one in a close game with Jalen Hurts coming back from a shoulder injury. So certainly big spread in that one. The Eagles, it was never really particularly close. And then another game that I was on two sides of the same coin. I went into this game thinking that it was going to be close between Buffalo and Cincinnati. And I thought Buffalo was going to have that slight edge being at home.
I had the Bengals.
I was both surprised. You had the Bengals. I was both surprised, and then when I thought about it some more, not really surprised that the Bengals came out with the performance that they had. I mean, watching that game was, oh my gosh, Cincinnati is completely outplaying Buffalo. And as the game went on, it was like they simply are a more balanced, better team. And this was a lesson that I hadn't learned from a couple of years back when we said, yeah, Tampa Bay is better than Kansas City, but Kansas City's got the quarterback, the tight end, the receiver. And across the show, we all said Chiefs, ignoring all the analysis that we had done. Bengals going into this game, it was, they have the better, balanced, deeper team. But Stephon Diggs, Josh Allen is at times superhuman. We saw those guys come up a little bit short. So which victory was more impressive? Cincinnati winning as convincingly as they did on the road, or the Eagles, holding home court and absolutely pounding a division rival that they were playing for the third time this season? Also not insignificant, facing the same opponent 3 times and winning all 3 matchups.
Yeah, I think it's very close. I mean, I think both performances were phenomenal by the Eagles and Bengals. Almost makes you question things a little bit. I'm going to stick with my picks. As you know, I've been about the Chiefs and Niners for not only before our playoff preview, for about the last 2 months. I've said this is going to be the Super Bowl. Once I found out that Brock Purdy, he's legit. Once I found out that he's not going to be just some scrub quarterback, I've been convinced that's going to be the Super Bowl. I'm a little bit less convinced than I was 2 months ago, but I still think that the Eagles and Bengals are making me scratch my head just a little bit. Look, anytime you win a playoff game 38-7, it's very impressive. The Eagles absolutely dominated on both sides of the ball, outgained the Giants 416-227. Jalen Hurts looked healthy, looked good. Philly owned the line of scrimmage, 268 rushing yards. They had more rushing yards than the Giants had total yards. So much better team, though, Philly. Like you said earlier this season, Philly already beat the Giants 48-22. So again, very impressive to win by 31. but they've already beaten this team by 26 earlier this season. And I know that last game was close, but again, Philly was up big in that game. It kind of was one of those where the Giants scored late a couple times, made it look closer than it really was. So I'm going to lean the other way. Very impressive from Philly. But Bengals and Bills, I think, are on paper pretty close to even teams. I mean, I picked the Bengals to win. I thought the Bengals would win. I did not think they would win 27-10, though. I also thought it was going to be a close game. One-score game, field goal, touchdown, where the game's on the line, last drive of the game, either Bengals are going in for the game-winning drive or Bills are trying to get the game tying or winning drive type deal. So to win 27-10 on the road was very impressive. Look, the Bills averaged 28.4 points per game this year. They had 34 points in their last playoff game. That's a team that gets about 30 a game, Tom. They were held to 10 points, their season low. I know we'll talk a lot about Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's getting a lot of love. I've had Joe Burrow as the second best quarterback in the NFL for months. I mean, this is what it was with Josh Allen. The numbers are there, but the inconsistency, I can't make you the second best quarterback in the league if you're going to have some inconsistent games, if you have some turnovers. So I've had Burrow as the second best quarterback. Burrow was Burrow. Ja'Marr Chase was Ja'Marr Chase. But this game was actually all about two areas. The Bengals offensive line, which has struggled, allowing just one sack, and the Bengals defense. I mean, 10 points for Buffalo. That's just crazy how well they played against them. I did expect Burrow to play good. I did expect without Von Miller, the Bengals O-line to hold up well enough. I did not think that this was going to be 10 points for the Bills. I mean, that's what was very impressive. The Bengals defense was the most impressive unit as a whole this weekend of any of the teams we saw. So, I mean, they completely had control of that game. A ton of balance in offense, 172 yards rushing, 242 pass yards, no turnovers, hold the Bills to 10 points. It was like a perfect performance, but against a much better team than what the New York Giants are. So for me, the Bengals were the most impressive team this weekend. And I think you were kind of saying this to me. I think it was off air, but now I'm losing track of what was said off air and on air. But I do think that we have the four best teams in the conference championship games. I think going into the playoffs, you and I said there was 5 teams that can win the whole thing. Realistically, we had the Chiefs, Bengals, Bills. We knew that one of the Bengals or Bills winner would be out. And then we had in the NFC, I thought the NFC was, and we kind of saw it this weekend. I mean, the Eagles and Niners are a class above the rest of the NFC. We'll get into that game here in a little bit. But first, for you, what was more impressive, the Bengals win or the Eagles win?
Oh, it's absolutely the Bengals win. I don't even think it's particularly close because going into the playoffs, we talked about a matchup between the Vikings and the Giants, and we noted how those two teams had minus point differentials on a season, which in the grand scheme of things means that you're winning a lot of close games and that by and large, your victories are closer related to variance necessarily than how good of a team that you are.
Sure.
And that was evidenced with the Vikings being 11-0, and I believe the Giants were 9-4 in one-score games.
Something like that.
So going into this game, I thought Eagles would win pretty handily in this one, and we saw that was exactly the case. We saw a team with the Giants that didn't have a great receiving core, had a quarterback in Daniel Jones that played really well, in a dome stadium on the turf against the Vikings defense that was dead last in the NFL in combined points and yards given up on the season. He goes up against a legit defense in Philadelphia, and we saw him be very, very limited. It was a complete step up in class. So I don't want to say that the Giants necessarily didn't deserve to be there because they absolutely earned to where they got. I just think that was the ceiling for the Giants all season long. When they came out, they started out, 7-2 at the beginning of the year. This is pretty much where I thought, hey, they could maybe win a wild card game, but they're certainly not going to get to the conference championship. There's just a clear difference in talent, which is why I think Cincinnati doing what they did on the road in Buffalo with an offensive line that has 3 injured starters.
Maybe the wrong guys are playing. Maybe the wrong guys are playing.
Maybe.
Right?
It was one of those things where, Von Miller is out, but Buffalo still has a pretty deep, pretty talented pass rush. And we saw that. I don't know if it's because of the snow that slows up a little bit of your pass rush. But basically, we just saw Cincinnati have arguably their best offensive line performance of the season in a game that is, up to this point, the most important game that they have played. Of course, this game, and should they win and get to the Super Bowl, obviously those will be the next most important games. But they were very impressive, I thought, in how they were balanced with their offensive attack, how they were balanced and really consistent on defense in limiting the big plays and enforcing Josh Allen to be essentially Superman, which we know that he is capable of doing. But I've said this years past on the show, especially when we're talking about quarterbacks like Aaron Rodgers, for example, you can't just say, hey, we have a great quarterback, he's going to cover up for all of our other deficiencies. We saw that Buffalo, without a consistent running game, without a consistent passing game behind Stephon Diggs, who is incredible, but not really consistent second and third receivers, you're asking a quarterback to do way too much, and that is a recipe for disaster. What did the Bengals do? They already had Tyler Boyd. They draft T. Higgins. They get Jamar Chase for Joe Burrow. And look at what's happened. They've taken off from there because they've built up a strong support system around their quarterback to allow him to flourish. It's the exact same thing in Kansas City, in Philadelphia, in San Francisco. What we are seeing in the championship weekend is a microcosm of what happens when you actually surround the most important player on your team with the pieces that he needs to succeed. And then he'll be the difference maker in that case, but he can't be the get you to break even and the difference maker. That's right. Too much. Buffalo has lessons to learn. And as somebody who picked the Buffalo Bills to win the Super Bowl preseason and pre-playoffs, that's a lesson that I learned as well, is can't count on Superman to always show up and save you. You have to have more balance on your team than that. That's why I think Cincinnati was most impressive with what they did.
Yeah, just real quick note. I know I agree with what you're saying. Obviously, I think that, and kind of ironic, I mean, Joe Burrow has probably even better weapons than Mahomes, to be honest. I think that he's got a better number 2 and number 3 option than the Bills, obviously. But, I mean, again, I hate to be one of these where I told you so type deals, but I agree. He needs help, but Josh Allen is inconsistent. He is, of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, he is the most inconsistent of these guys. We've seen games like this from him the whole season. He's had some games where he puts up insane numbers, other games where he's just not quite as good. That's what it came down to me. Like, I trust Burrow more. I trust Mahomes more. At his best, Josh Allen is better than Joe Burrow. But Joe Burrow, to me, overall is more consistent. I mean, has this game convinced you Burrow's better than Allen, or are you still kind of on the fence? You like the fact that Burrow's got better weapons? Because I do agree he's got better weapons than Josh Allen.
So part of me is going to be influenced by the fact that I am in a dynasty league with my brother-in-law.
Okay,
and we have Joe Burrow.
That's not a good thing we have.
No, we have Joe Burrow as our quarterback. I'm such a huge fan of him. I was a fan of him going into this game, and the fact that he outplayed Josh Allen is like, okay, I'm willing to say he's second best quarterback. Maybe not necessarily in terms of like overall talent and all the things that he can do, because Josh Allen as a runner is better than Joe Burrow.
Right.
But if we're saying, but as a pocket passer, I mean, Joe Burrow might
Which
be.
Quarterback would you rather have win you a playoff game? Burrow. Joe Burrow. Okay, good. That was my point the whole way. And you'll hear me argue the inverse of Burrow versus Mahomes, and I'll contradict myself, but we'll get to that a little down the road. I'm glad you're on the same page, because I think if you're picking. Go ahead.
If you're picking between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes as win one game, that's damn near as close as you can get to a coin flip. Like this is the Manning Brady, debate of years past. Like this is, and it's really nice and fun to see.
It's gonna be fun.
So speaking of Mahomes, going to be matching up in Arrowhead with Joe Burrow, but first, quick recap on their game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. A 7-point win. Granted, it was a field goal to bring it within one possession, so Jacksonville could at least attempt onside kick, et cetera, et cetera. Sure. And then the 49ers winning a close one over Dallas. So, we said these are the 4 best teams in the NFL right now matching up against each other for the conference championships. So just like we had 2 very impressive blowouts that we were just talking about, 2 close games. Is this more about these 2 teams struggling, or was it just a matter that, Jacksonville better team and Dallas better team?
Yeah, I mean, it's more so that Jacksonville and Dallas were really good teams. Look, the Chiefs were in control this whole game. They didn't really trail, I don't think, the entire game. I know they have to make some adjustments when Mahomes goes down. I mean, I think it was like 10-0. They were cruising. That's almost kind of like a mental thing when you see your quarterback go down. I know Chad Henne stepped in and played great. But I think that Jacksonville was just a really good team down the stretch. They played a really good ball game. I mean, it wasn't Kansas City's best game, but I think this was more of Jacksonville playing good. I mean, you never felt like Kansas City was going to lose this game. Even when Jacksonville got a touchdown at one point in the fourth quarter and make it a 3-point game, it was a double-digit lead, a big chunk of the game, and that was with a limited Mahomes. I think Kansas City did what it had to do. They put up enough points, and they held a pretty good offense to enough points as well. So I think it's a playoff game. Playoff games are tough to win. I thought Kansas City played well. I think San Francisco was a little bit less convincing because their offense did struggle in this game. With that said, though, Dallas has a great defense. I mean, they had the one disappointing turnover on special teams. Their defense was great, obviously. Allowed 12 points, forced a couple turnovers. The offense, though, did not turn the ball over, which is good. And I just want to make this comment, Tom. I actually, because we were talking about this, who's better, Brock Purdy or Dak Prescott last week? And I actually fall on the same argument of Burrow versus Allen versus Purdy versus Prescott. Because, I mean, again, Dak Prescott could come back and be the quarterback he was a couple years ago. But then there's the other side of things that maybe Dak Prescott isn't as great as we thought he was. Maybe he was overachieving. Maybe he did have those really good pieces. The offensive line's gotten worse. You lost Amari Cooper. So
that's the support.
I think right now, if we're being honest, Dak Prescott might have a better ceiling than Brock Purdy, but Brock Purdy is a more consistent player week in, week out. So it's one of those deals like, who's the better quarterback? I mean, Brock Purdy was not amazing by any means. However, he did not make mistakes to cost his team. And I think that's a guy that's a better, more trustworthy quarterback for me than Dak Prescott. Like, if I was picking a quarterback for an entire football season or a big game as to which guy do I trust, I'm probably taking Brock Purdy over Dak Prescott. I mean, Dak led the league in picks. And Josh Allen, by the way, I think it was like maybe second. We talk about Mahomes being a gunslinger. I mean, it's Prescott and Allen who were up there for most picks. So I think that San Francisco was just okay on offense, but again, did not feel like a game that you really thought Dallas would win at any point. I know it was close a lot of the way. That George Kittle catch was spectacular. So San Francisco did just enough. I mean, of the four teams that are in the conference championship game, San Francisco was the least convincing. But I think they'll be fine. I like San Francisco. I would say that they struggled offensively a little bit. Defensively, though, they were the Niners. It's what they do on defense. They're spectacular. So I think it's going to be a good weekend for San Francisco's defense again, by the way.
Yeah, no, I think that in the case of Kansas City, it was just, Jacksonville is, I think, a little bit on the rise in terms of Trevor Lawrence developing as a quarterback.
100%.
Their offensive weapons developing. And then, I mean, yeah, you could say the Patrick Mahomes high ankle sprain in the second quarter, but that Chad Henne comes in. And again, we're talking about support systems here, able to march Kansas City down the field. I'm not saying that just any quarterback can do it, but that Kansas City is better equipped with a veteran guy like Chad Henne, who's been there and done it before. I think he came in
against the Browns.
Was it a couple years back against the Browns? Yeah, exactly.
Browns.
Came in
yeah.
and brought them some success. So that's just, that's good coaching. That's good preparation. On the flip side, I think that the San Francisco win was because Dallas is a step up in quality of competition, particularly when you're going San Francisco offense to Dallas defense. Because when you look at some of the opponents that San Francisco was playing toward the end of the season, putting up a lot of numbers on offense, but it was against Washington, it was against Las Vegas, it was against Arizona. And then you go to the Dallas Cowboys. Let me see if I have this here, who averaged giving up 19.7 points per game on the season, a really, really good defense.
Yeah.
I mean, gave up 19, pretty much right at that average.
Yeah.
It was a matter of San Francisco's defense being the difference and getting some, key critical turnovers against Dak Prescott. In prime opportunities for Dallas where he could have stepped up and delivered. But this is another case where, like you said, offensive line in Dallas is not as good as it was outside of CeeDee Lamb and maybe Dalton Schultz at tight end. Don't really have consistent receiving options. Of course, Tony Pollard with a leg fracture, going out of the game. You're relying on Zeke
running
Elliott,
back on the Cowboys roster, Tony Pollard.
Yeah, exactly. So Dak basically was in a situation where he's going up against an absolute grinder of a defense, probably best defense right up there, I think, with Philadelphia.
They're number one in points and yards. They're the best defense.
Exactly. Like trying to do having to try to do too much with not enough. But I think, the key thing is that San Francisco's defense is going to be the same. They performed like they had all season. We saw their offense dip down quite a bit going up against a really strong defense, and I think that's going to be continuing in their matchup against Philadelphia this week. So I think San Francisco struggled on offense because they're actually facing high-quality defenses now. It's no longer Washington, Vegas, Arizona, even Seattle, which is a solid.
Washington has a good defense, by the way. Of all those teams you listed, Washington is good, but they're pretty good
over the season.
They were like top 5 in yards. I think Washington was yards allowed. I think they were
eighth on the season with 20.2 points per game given up. So it's that's a better defense, but certainly not a team that's great on that side of the ball. I think that recaps the champion or the divisional round rather. So now, I mean, I guess the biggest one, the most exciting one, it's kind of hard to pick one as the most exciting because they're both really, really good. But we'll start in the AFC. We will go to Arrowhead Stadium, refund all of those tickets if you're going to be flying to Atlanta. The Bengals, Zach Taylor, their head coach, summed it up the best. Everybody's trying to come up with all these different plans and everything. We just keep ruining them by winning.
I like
which I think it's great. The swagger is so fantastic coming out of Cincinnati.
How often do we hear him being talked about as one of the best coaches, by the way? Never. Just so you know.
Not nearly enough, which is going to be kind of like a key point with the intangibles that we're going to be talking about in this matchup. But I mean, I think the biggest thing going in is the Patrick Mahomes injury. It was labeled as a high ankle sprain the day that it happened. I don't know if the diagnosis has changed.
It's the same.
But I know Tony Romo was saying on the call, like, high ankle sprain is something that you can get away with playing on the rest of the day. But it's going to be the next morning when you wake up that you're going to have a hard time. Maybe by middle of the week, you're going to be on crutches type of thing. So
no crutches are booed for Mahomes today, by the way. And he's at practice.
Yeah.
So you know.
So it's one of those things where I think to myself, okay, maybe is it a little bit mislabeled as far as a high ankle sprain goes? Because every time I hear it, it's like a 2 to 5 week injury, a type of thing that you're going to be out. But certainly he was able to come back and play. They were able to shoot him up with enough adrenaline. I don't know. I know that they use various substances to kind of deal with same day pain. But certainly a lot of treatment that he's going to be going through. I think that last reports were that he was able to fully participate in practice, which is pretty incredible.
I'm reading it right now, by the way.
Is this going to be something that is going to be impactful either from him missing the game, which I think is highly unlikely?
Nope.
And then how do you think this impacts him in the game, which I think is more likely to key in on?
Yeah, so Mahomes is practicing today. I'm looking at, if you saw me looking at my phone, I wasn't ignoring you or texting anyone. Just easier than to look on the computer. It looks like he is practicing today, if what I'm reading is correct. It looks like I read that there's no walking boot, no crutches. So I did a little bit of reading. Certainly I'm not a medical doctor, but I did read that if it's a mild ankle sprain, it could get better within 3 days, Tom. If it's a more severe ankle sprain, it could be up to 3 to 5 weeks, as you said. So we don't know exactly the extent of this injury, but if it is a mild ankle sprain, which is what I'm hoping for, as a Mahomes and Chiefs guy, he really might be doing better. I don't think he'll be doing worse than the game. I know that Romo mentioned that, yes, you could play through it on the day, but I think a week's time will make it be better. The honest truth, though, Tom, there is no way to know until we see what happens on Sunday. That's the sad truth, because he might be better today, then tomorrow he might get worse. He might get better. He might get worse. Maybe he tweaks it again. I don't know. But the fact that he's practicing is encouraging. Yes, it's possible he fully recovers. Yes, it's possible it won't affect him at all. But realistically, he probably will lose at least some mobility this weekend. And, you know, even though I'm a Mahomes and a Chiefs guy, let's be real, it does hurt him this weekend. It does hurt him. I think if you ask the Chiefs and anybody else, they would rather have Mahomes be 100% healthy, not have any issues, let him run around and do his thing. And we're so used to him running around and making these crazy scramble passes, these jump throws, these no-look passes, these off-angle passes, which, by the way, your legs matter on those plays too. So he will be impacted. With that said, though, Mahomes is such a great pocket passer that it never gets talked about because he's that great at scramble. And I've mentioned this multiple times. Hold on, did my microphone change here? Weird. Let me make sure here.
It changed back. It just modulated for a second. You're good.
Just for a second? Okay, cool. So anyways, though, what I was saying, Tom, is that the guy can make plays. Andy Reid is a great coach. They do a lot of quick passes this season. It doesn't get talked about enough. They do a lot of the quick passes, and Mahomes to Kelsey in that short passing game, they'll make adjustments. I think he will be a little bit impacted, but I think they will be fine, is my guess, Tom. Can't say that he won't be impacted, but I don't think that, I don't know. This has influenced the betting line a lot, by the way. Chiefs at one point open as 2.5-point favorites, and now they're down to like a 2-point underdog if you look at BetMGM. So we'll see. I'd be lying if I said that I'm not a little bit concerned, but I think from what I'm seeing right now, I mean, the news is about as positive as it can be for Kansas City.
Yeah, and this is going to be the sort of thing where, from a coaching perspective, I mean, there's nothing to be gained by Kansas City coming out and saying that he's not practicing, he's not going to play, that sort of thing. They're going to hold their cards as close to the vest as they can until they have to disclose that stuff. I think it's 90 minutes before game time they have to list the actives and inactives. I mean, even if he plays, this is absolutely going to impact him. I mean, we've seen how it can impact him in the Super Bowl a couple of years back, because he went into that matchup against the Buccaneers with a turf toe injury, which, you know, limited his in-pocket mobility and limits the thing that makes Patrick Mahomes special. We don't see a whole lot of quarterbacks that have the escapability that he does. I'd say like maybe his closest comparison is Aaron Rodgers, somebody that you and I have seen twice a year for I don't know how long.
Not this version of Aaron Rodgers, the past one.
Well, no, but I mean, for a really long time,
sure.
It's the thing where, they got him. And he just somehow gets away and can scramble, can go and pick up yards with his feet, but is able to get away and then just make, just a flick of the wrist, casual throw. And all of a sudden, boom, it's a 70-yard touchdown to, name speedy receiver here, either Jordy Nelson for the Packers or Tyreek Hill for the Chiefs back a year ago.
At least you didn't say Randall Cobb, which is good.
I did not know.
Okay,
but
you.
That's something that I think it will hinder him, not necessarily as a runner, although that's not an impact, a part of his game. But really it's mobility in navigating the pocket. So this makes Cincinnati's job as a pass rush a little bit easier, and it makes the offensive line protection that much more important for Mahomes, because outside of Kelsey doesn't have that dominant outside receiver to necessarily get the ball to. I think we're going to see a bit more of screen game included for Mahomes. I know now we're kind of transitioning into offensive breakdown.
Yeah.
But I think it's absolutely going to impact him, and I think it's going to be a significant impact on how he's able to play. Not if he's going to, but when he does play, how he does.
Yeah, two more quick notes on the injury front, then we can transition into what's the better offense, whatever, et cetera, the matchups. Mahomes himself said that the injury that he has now, the high ankle sprain. He did play with the high ankle sprain in 2019, the year they won the Super Bowl, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then he said the turf toe he had in the next year, that in the year they lost to the Bucs, he said that was by far the worst injury he's ever had. He said what he had now is similar to 2019. And of course, again, he's going to talk it up. He's going to be optimistic.
Sure.
But he did say that he's played through it, and he said that he's comfortable playing through it. So we have seen him with this type of injury. It has not affected him too much. I mean, again, it's Mahomes. He's superhuman, next level guy. But keep that in mind. In the second front, that game against the Buccaneers, and I will say this, they had an injury going on that Super Bowl. One of their best offensive linemen did not play in the Super Bowl, but the offensive line was not what it was back then. The Chiefs this season, Tom, 2 Pro Bowlers on the offensive line. So I think the offensive line is going to keep them pretty protected. Jerick McKinnon, you might see a lot more of him in the backfield. That dude can block. He can block. So you better believe that Reed and company will scheme for Mahomes. There will be a lot of short passes to Travis Kelce, and they'll figure it out. Yes, it impacts them, but I don't think it's as big as people are thinking.
Yes, that kind of leads us into the keys of the game. Comparing, we'll start off with offense because that's the more exciting for most fans, the more exciting part of the game. We were talking about, Mahomes, probably best quarterback in the NFL, Burrow right behind him in that aspect, certainly better tight end with Travis Kelce. But then you flip over, Cincinnati has the better wide receivers. And then you mentioned a couple of Pro Bowlers for Kansas City, none for Cincinnati on the offensive line. So an overall offense, to whom do you give the edge? Because it kind of just depends on what you value personally, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely close. I think both teams are very good offensively, and they're a little bit different. But I mean, look, the Chiefs lead the league in points, total yards, passing yards. I can't say they don't have a better offense here because they lead the NFL in all these categories. I mean, the side argument would be that Mahomes is limited. Maybe they won't be as good. Obviously, as you mentioned, I actually think Joe Burrow has better overall weapons. Travis Kelce might be better than Ja'Marr Chase as the best overall weapon. But you look at Ja'Marr Chase, you look at T. Higgins, you look at Boyd. I mean, Higgins would be the number 1 receiver on the Chiefs. Boyd could even be the number 1 receiver on the Chiefs. As good as Joe Burrow is, though, for me, Mahomes is just the plays he makes, the throws. I mean, look at the stats. Highest passer rating, regular season, postseason. I'm a huge stats guy, Tom, but I'm also the eye test. Mahomes does it all. He gives you the eye test, and he gives you the stats. Just because I think Mahomes is better than Burrow, even on one leg, I might argue he's better because Burrow's not as mobile. I think that, he is mobile enough, but not as mobile. I think Mahomes will find a way. I think the offensive line, though, is probably where there's the biggest difference. Because actually, believe it or not, Tom, Kansas City had more rushing yards than the Bengals this year. I know that Joe Mixon might be the best overall back, but you look at McKinnon and Pacheco, the Chiefs have more depth in the backfield. They're better pass catchers. They're better blockers. So I'm not convinced that Cincinnati has a better run game or a better overall running staff than what Kansas City has. So it's close. Bengals have the edge at receiver. Chiefs have the edge at tight end. Running back is close. Quarterback, I think Mahomes is better, but again, it's close. But overall, it's close, but the offensive line is a big difference. 2 Pro Bowlers for Kansas City. Meanwhile, the Bengals, again, among the leaders in the league in sacks allowed. So I think that the Chiefs are the better overall offense. I think that I do like Kansas City's offense a little bit better. But if Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins are cooking, Joe Burrow gets time to pass. We'll get into defense, we'll get into matchups, but a lot of talk goes on Mahomes' ankle sprain. How will that affect the game? The big talking point is, how are the Bengals' offensive line going to hold up? Because Kansas City, Tom, this season, 2nd in the NFL in sacks. The Bills, by the way, were about middle of the pack. You talk about their pass rush, but since Von Miller left, their pass rush was below average. Steep decline. I'm talking off the top of my head. These may not be the exact stats, but I think it was like 40 sacks for the Bills this year, 55 for the Chiefs, something like that. So Kansas City much better for sure on that end. But I mean, I think both offenses are great. I do like Kansas City a little bit more because of the quarterback and the O-line in particular.
Yeah, I think Kansas City's much better balanced on the offensive side of the football. I mean, Burrow and Mahomes, I'm edge to Mahomes, but I think they're close enough, especially if you want to factor in the injury, that's more or less a wash. It's more or less a coin flip for me in terms of winning one game. And then, offensive line, I always think that's a significant advantage for teams. That's why I didn't pick Cincinnati to win last week, is because I thought their offensive line was not going to be well equipped to win that game. They went out and showed that they are, and it's going to be up to them to do that again, as Chris Jones, who I believe has like 15 sacks,
15 and
that's
a half,
the sort of thing where when you're 15 and a half, when you think about a pass rush, I mean, there's two different ways that you can have it. You can have it coming around the edge, in which case the quarterback is going to step up in the pocket and make a throw. But a lot of different football people contend that if you have a good interior pass rush, that forces the quarterback off his platform and to have to break out one side or the other. So, how Alex Kappa at center and the rest of that interior of the Bengals line handles Chris Jones is going to be massively significant in this game. I think there's better balance on Kansas City as well. They've shown that, yeah, you can have your go-to of Mahomes to Kelsey and then just supplement it with a bunch of other really nice complementary pieces, none of whom are necessarily outstanding players, I would say.
But they're all good.
But they're good players. They're good, and they fit the role that Andy Reid is going to scheme up in that offense. So I also, like you, I'm giving an edge to Kansas City, although it's certainly close. I mean, if you look at the numbers, they're about 3 points per game off over the course of the season.
That's what it takes to win a game, though.
I know that Cincinnati didn't have Jamar Chase for a stretch, so that's why I'm not going to say it's definitely a 3-point difference between offenses. Sure. But if you look at the last 3 games that they played when these teams have been relatively healthy, over the past 3 games, Kansas City 28.3 points, Cincinnati at 26. So about 2.5 point difference between what those offenses are putting up. So I would say slight edge to Kansas City on the offense front, but Cincinnati definitely is going to be keeping it close in that regard.
Yeah, one more note on offense. Mecole Hardman practiced this week. He's been out for Kansas City a lot. Actually, Tom, I know that the injury news about Mahomes is such a big story this week, but the Chiefs, every single player practiced this week, which means they are as healthy as you can be at this point of the season. So Mecole Hardman's back, another weapon. Tony's practicing. Yep. So other than Mahomes and Hardman, by the way, you talk about screens. Hardman's great in the screen game. Tony's great in the screen game. They don't have a great receiver, but they have a great quarterback and they have a great scheme, and they have a lot of decent guys who are speedy. Speed can kill with scheme and with the quarterback. So think about that. Kansas City, ironically, the biggest story of the week is that Mahomes is injured, but this is a very healthy Chiefs team overall going into this AFC Championship game. More healthy than the Bengals offensive line, but again, who knows? Maybe the wrong guys were playing. I don't know. Who knows?
That's definitely possible. Flipping over to the defensive side of the ball, I think it's just kind of flipping over the preferences on this side. I think that Cincinnati's defense is a bit better than Kansas City. I mean, obviously Kansas City has some great individual talents, but somehow, some way, Cincinnati's defense plays better than the individual parts. The sum is much, much greater than the whole. Looking at points given up this season, Cincinnati giving up 19.4 on the year. Really Kansas City giving up 21.6. The difference in that is Cincinnati was 5th in total points, Kansas City at 15th. So there's a lot of teams kind of bunched up around that number. But that's where you see that couple point flip between offense and defense. And then I like looking at last 3 just because, like you said, this is about as close to representative as of health as the teams have been. In the last 3, Cincinnati giving up 14.3 points per game. Kansas City giving up 19 points per game. So overall defense, I'm going to go with the Bengals on this one as being a better overall unit than Kansas City. And again, it's the slight edge to Kansas City, slight edge to Cincinnati on each side of the ball, and that matches up head to head. It's going to be fascinating to see how these different matchups play out.
Yeah, Bengals a little bit better scoring defense, although I know you mentioned the last three, but keep in mind that I think two of those were against the Ravens without Lamar Jackson. So it makes it a little bit easier.
True. That's some context. Yeah.
The Jaguars are a better offense than certainly the Ravens. I mean, look, the Bengals are better on scoring defense, but not by a lot, though. The Chiefs actually gave up less yards this season, like total defense. Yards allowed. Kansas City gave up less yards. They had more sacks. So, again, I would give a very slight edge to the Bengals. As you said, overall, they have 11 players who are better as a unit, but not by much. They have one Pro Bowler. Chiefs, I think, have a couple, I believe. But, I mean, you look at Chris Jones. Chris Jones, top 5 in the NFL in sacks. He's probably better than anyone that the Bengals have on their defense. Nick Bolton, probably better than anyone the Bengals have. He was like second in the NFL in tackles this year. Does not get talked about enough. The guy I used to interview all the time when I covered sports for the Mizzou Tigers at the CBS station. The guy was like a practice squad player. He wasn't like a 5-star recruit, and the guy's been phenomenal. Nick Bolton's been a Missouri guy, dominating for the Tigers, dominating for the Chiefs. So I do agree overall, Kansas City maybe a little bit worse, but it's very close. I think Kansas City's defense is a lot better than anyone gives it credit to. And something about Spagnuolo, I don't know what it is about the guys, but this Kansas City team always seems to be better on defense the second half of the year. Always. Like you look at the season averages, it just seems like they whip in the shape right in time for the end of the season, right in time for the playoffs. So I do think the Bengals have a slight edge on defense, Chiefs slight edge on offense. I do agree with ultimately what you were kind of saying there. So it should be a close game. I mean, their point differential is pretty similar, Tom.
Yeah.
Should be a very close game.
Yes, that leads us into the intangibles, kind of what you think might be the quote X factor in the game. Certainly, I think coaching, I'm going to put it as pretty much about even. I know Andy Reid has a much longer list of bona fides than Zach Taylor does, but I think that's by virtue of the fact that Andy Reid simply has been coaching for a really, really long time, whereas Zach Taylor, this is his first gig, and he is doing pretty well, with this team, taking a Bengals franchise that's more or less been a laughing stock. You think about, the pinnacle of their success was the Marvin Lewis years, which would be somewhere between 8-8 and 10-6 in a first-round playoff exit. And here we have the Bengals in back-to-back AFC championship games, knocking on the door of back-to-back Super Bowl appearances. I think not the only difference. I think that the biggest difference between talking about Andy Reid and Zach Taylor is just we have so much more we can talk about with Andy Reid, who is, I don't even know if I'd say arguably, he's my favorite coach in the NFL all time. So I'm going to give like that slight intangible edge to Andy Reid. By the way, the State Farm commercial with the markers, his comedic timing with that is fantastic. I'm always disappointed when they have it shortened up. I like the full drawing on the lineman's face. Patrick Mahomes comes up as his coach. It happened again, throwing away the marker. I'm going to get to the bottom of this.
I love that commercial. I love
it. He's such a wonderful individual, both coaching and then just, off the field as well. I really like Andy Reid. He loves
those cheeseburgers, man.
I think that, as an overall head coach, I like Andy Reid better, but just like if we're talking about the feel, the swagger of a team, I think that Cincinnati, quote, benefits a little bit, or like, at least they're leaning into this whole, we're messing up all these plans, we're making up rules at the end of the season of a coin flip determining who hosts between Baltimore and Cincinnati. We're just going to go out, win, and completely remove that thing between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. Oh, we're selling tickets to Atlanta for Kansas City and Buffalo. We're just going to go out and win in convincing fashion in Buffalo and ruin your plans. The Bengals have moxie. So I don't know how much of that necessarily translates into X's and O's, but what it tells me is that they have a sense of, we belong here, we've been here before, we've done this before, and we're not going to be intimidated by anyone or anything. And I think that's pretty important. Not saying that Kansas City doesn't have that, but that is, as the team that while they are favored, I think most people publicly would still pick Kansas City to win this game as the
That's not what the
favorite.
bettors are
I think the
picking.
Bengals are going to. Well, that's not what Vegas is putting in, because
Yeah.
Vegas is trying to hedge against the Patrick Mahomes thing. It would not surprise me if this line switched back to Kansas City if we got news that Mahomes was for sure playing. I think that Vegas is trying to hedge a little bit against possible injury news. So that's the only reason why I'm saying the line isn't gospel, so to speak, in this case.
I don't know. I saw a couple experts on ESPN both pick the Bengals, by the way. Experts,
I'm sure. I'm sure that they do pick the Bengals. And
I think it's pretty divided, Tom. I just don't think we can really have a true favorite in this game as far as what people are saying. I think
Bengals are going to continue to lean into the public perception. So I'm going to say intangible slightly to Cincinnati, but I don't know how much that's worth, if anything.
Yeah, it's actually so interesting because I took this question as like everything but offense and defense. And actually, one other thing that doesn't get talked about, Harrison Butker's had a really weird year for Kansas City, as has the Bengals kicker.
True.
They both missed a lot of extra points this season, and they both can kick a 50, 60-yard field goal. So both kickers, you don't know what you're going to get with them. So that's something to think about in a close game. The kickers matter. But as far, intangibles, look, I like Zach Taylor a lot. I agree with everything you're saying. He's got the moxie. Burrow's got the moxie. What do they say? Your team's a reflection of your coach and your quarterback. Those guys are super confident. I know what you're saying makes sense. Look, the sample size, but it's Andy Reid. I mean, come on. It's Andy Reid. This guy's an offensive genius. This guy's a great coach. By the way, tied for second all time in playoff wins with Tom Landry, I believe. I cannot sit here and say that the Chiefs don't have the coaching advantage with Andy Reid as their coach. I feel like going into just about every week, albeit it's close, it's Andy Reid. Give me Andy Reid. But there's other intangibles I look at. I mean, one of the most interesting ones is this whole fact of Cincinnati's won 3 games in a row against the Chiefs. How much does that matter? Because on one side, you can say, look, they've got their number. Obviously, they believe they'll win. On the other side, they were all 3-point games. They didn't dominate any of the games. Kansas City had more turnovers, especially in the last 2 games in particular. Kansas City actually led much of the AFC title game last year. They led a lot of the game earlier this season on the road. So is it like one of those deals where like, oh, we've got their number? Or is it one of those deals that Kansas City didn't play a clean game and they lost? I mean, how often does Travis Kelce fumble? Kansas City was going in for a 2-score lead at Cincinnati on the road. If Travis Kelce doesn't fumble, if Harrison Butker doesn't miss a kick, the Chiefs might win that game. I know it sounds like an excuse, whatever, but like that's the fact. Kansas City has not played their best game against the Bengals the last 2 years. Meanwhile, Cincinnati has played their best games against Kansas City. So it's such a small sample size. I almost look at it like Kansas City might say, look, we were so close. We just got to make an adjustment or two, not turn the ball over. We win the game. So I don't know which side of that argument like works more. Because, I mean, I think both teams believe they're the better team. Both teams believe they're going to win. So, I mean, look, there's the whole Mahomes intangible. Mahomes is hurt. That's an edge to the Bengals because he's hurt. But then there's also the whole side of things that Mahomes, like, it's interesting because I think that I'm looking at a lot of stuff that's being said out there, and people are saying if Joe Burrow wins this game, maybe he's the guy. Maybe Mahomes isn't the guy. Maybe Burrow's the guy. Patrick Mahomes is listening to this stuff. I don't buy into one game changing things. I'll have more on that in the statement of the week, but Mahomes is motivated. So is Burrow. Burrow wants to be the guy. So it's crazy. I do think one intangible that does help, though, for Kansas City is that the fact that this game is at home, beyond the home field advantage, which Arrowhead is super loud, I think that it helps in Mahomes' recovery. I know technically maybe it's better if he's in a dome with the ankle sprain, but I think that he'd rather be in his own familiar surroundings. He'd rather not have that extra flight. He'd rather have his own doctors at the team facility. So I think the fact that this Mahomes injury, it's better that he's dealing with it in Kansas City, Tom. So I do think that helps. Overall, I think it's a virtual wash. I mean, I think we've brought up intangibles on one side, intangibles on the other side. For me, it's a pretty virtual wash on the intangibles in this game.
Well, that brings us to the reckoning moment here, Common. Who wins, and by how much do the Chiefs win?
Well, for the sake of my heart, my sanity, I hope they win by 14 points and we don't have to worry about it. But realistically, I'm going to pick the same score. I think the last two times these two teams played, I think it was 27-24. I think Bengals won. This time I'm going Chiefs 27-24. Look, they've got the better quarterback. They've got the better coach. I know you're going to tell me about the depth of team, but Kansas City's depth is greatly underrated. They have a very good defense that doesn't get talked about. They've got a lot of good guys in the backfield, Pacheco, McKinnon. The receivers may not be great, but Hardman, Tony, these guys are athletes. Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore. They have a lot of decent guys who can contribute. I still look at it this way. As great as Joe Burrow is, as great as Jamar Chase is, as great as Zach Taylor is, I think Kansas City's got the best quarterback in Mahomes. They've got the best skill player in Travis Kelce. They've got the best coach in Andy Reid. They've got the home field. They've got the best defensive player in Chris Jones. And I do think their depth is really good. I don't want this to turn into this whole argument of, look, the Bengals have better overall depth. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I think the Chiefs do have depth. I think that the Chiefs star players are better. I do think that Kansas City being second in the NFL in sacks this season, Chris Jones top 5 in the league, the Bengals' porous offensive line, it is going to show in Kansas City. So I do think that's going to be a huge difference. I do think that the fact that Kansas City is like a 1 or 2 point underdog, oh man, that is dangerous. I know that these teams are both motivated, but the fact that Kansas City is an underdog at home, I actually think Kansas City, we see them come back in a lot of these games. I think that this is going to be like the AFC Championship game a few years ago against the Bills. Kansas City had all these close games. Everyone was talking about, are the Bills going to take over? Kansas City laid it on them. I think Kansas City jumps out to an early lead in this game. And I think that the Bengals make it close late. But I think Mahomes is the single greatest player in the history of the NFL. There's nothing like him. Even on one leg, he's better than most of these guys. I mean, even the stats, I looked at some stats. Mahomes, after the injury, was still like better than like everyone this last weekend. He is such a great player. You put together the most underrated part about Mahomes, Tom, is his intelligence. He is such a smart player. Whenever he throws these picks, he knows when to throw them, if that makes sense. It's when they're up. He forces the ball when they're up. He had against the Broncos. You look at his interception numbers, he had like 3 picks. They're up the whole game. He's a very smart guy. Because he's a gunslinger, his decision-making does not get talked about enough. He's a very smart player. He understands coverage. Him and Andy Reid together, they're going to come up with a master plan. Travis Kelce, the smartest non-quarterback in the NFL, he'll have a plan. They'll run that offense. It's called, I think Chris Collinsworth said it on Saturday. They have an entire offense that's designed around Travis Kelce blocking, fake blocking, and then going out to catch the ball. We'll see a lot of 7-8 yard pass plays to Travis Kelce. The Bengals are going to be fed up with it. They're going to hate it so much. I'm going to love it. Give me the 7-8 yard pass to Travis Kelce. I think this is Mahomes' moment. The fact that it bothers me that people always want to say it was Lamar Jackson, then it was Josh Allen, now it's Joe Burrow. This guy's played in 5 AFC Championship games in the 5 seasons he's played. He's about to win his 2nd MVP, and he was hurt one of the seasons. Essentially, 2 out of 4 years where he played enough games, he will be the MVP. I mean, the guy is superhuman. He's got all the stats. He's got the it factor. He's got the swagger. I know Burrow has the same swagger, but Burrow does not have the same talent. Unlike Josh Allen, who's got all the talent, maybe doesn't have it, Mahomes has the talent, and he's got it, and he's got Andy Reid, and he's got the home field. Give me the Chiefs, 27-24. Patty Ice delivers.
It's amazing that the Chiefs have lost a single game at all over the past 5 years,
Isn't
given
it? Isn't
how
it?
great everything is with the Chiefs and everything. I mean,
With
they're
Mahomes.
dang near walking on the river outside of Boonville. We are so unoriginal
Boonville.
because I'm also going 27-24, but I'm going to go with the Bengals on this one. If only for
Oh,
it's just no fun if you and I are on the same side
I
of this thing.
know.
I know
I
we're going to be on
know.
the opposite side of the NFC, but we're going to go on the opposite side of this thing. We
Okay.
don't know the truth about the ankle in full. I think that is legitimately going to be significant
I agree.
because
I agree.
I say it's like a 95% chance, even 99% chance that he plays, but there is that 1% chance that he is not able to go, or even if Patrick Mahomes is able to go, that it does limit him severely enough that he is not who he is. And while, yes, on one leg, Patrick Mahomes is better than most other quarterbacks in the league, he's not on one leg better than Joe Burrow. Burrow's
We'll see.
close enough that
Yeah.
half of Mahomes' leg, or I guess if we're dividing into quadrants, 75% of Mahomes. I don't really know how this
I
works
love it. I
anatomically
love it.
speaking. I don't think that Mahomes at 75% is better than 100% of Joe Burrow, which is what
We'll
we're
see.
going to be getting heading
We'll
into this
see.
game. So it's going to be fascinating. I think it's, similarly going to be a 27-4 game
27
because this, I
24.
don't know.
You just said
I just
four.
could.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, 24.
Yeah.
Yeah, if it's only four, if the team only puts up 4 points, I don't know if that's ever happened. That'd be
Two
fascinating. But
safeties,
anyway,
baby.
moving on to the NFC side of things, because
Real
you
quick,
spent
Tom. Real quick. I just do
yes.
want to say, I know we got to move on, but I will say if Mahomes is significantly hurt, it would not shock me if the Chiefs lose, but I got to go with
Oh, of course,
Mahomes
yeah.
because he's that great. I know I'm talking a big game, but this is a toss-up. I still like Mahomes, Reed, and the Chiefs at home.
Absolutely. And looking at weather reports for that game, the wind looks pretty tame, which is the biggest indicator usually of if a game's going to be high scoring or not. 26 in Kansas City. So that's going to be another thing to keep an eye on is sprains don't do well when you have cold, hard ground. So that's going to be certainly a significant thing to look at. I don't know if we've ever talked about an injury with a single player, but of course, with a player as significant as Patrick Mahomes, that is going to be a factor in that game. Moving to the NFC side of things, we have San Francisco and Philadelphia, the top two seeds facing off against each other, the two teams that we knew were going to be here, simply because there was a clear difference in class between them and the rest of the NFC. So starting out on the offensive side of things, you can go either way, actually, on this one,
No question.
whether it's Nick Sirianni's offense versus Kyle Shanahan's offense. Although, unlike what we were talking about with Cincinnati and with Kansas City, I think that there's one key difference in making this answer, which is why I'm going to say Philadelphia. I'm just going to put it right out there that if you look at skill position players, I think you can give the edge to San Francisco by a slight margin. Certainly because, Christian McCaffrey, I would say, is better than Miles Sanders. But if we're comparing Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle to A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, pretty even. I think slight edge because McCaffrey is, I think, a bit better than Miles Sanders. And certainly we're talking about two of the best offensive lines. So I'm going Philadelphia because Jalen Hurts is better than Brock Purdy. I know that you're measuring inseams and whatnot for Purdy's gold jacket, but I'm not ready to go there just yet. Not Mahomes. Jalen Hurts has shown throughout the season that he's taken that additional step forward in his development, in his growth, certainly becoming a better passer in addition to using his legs and being smarter about how and when to run. So I think Philadelphia gets an edge in offense, although Kyle Shanahan is going to cook up and scheme up some bunch of whatever to try to make his Mr. Irrelevant quarterback very relevant in this game. But I go edge Philadelphia.
Yeah, just to be clear, I love Brock Purdy a lot. I think he's an NFL starter for years to come. I'm not ready to draw the seams on the gold jacket. I don't like him quite that much, Tom. I know I've made those statements before. Now, Bryce Young, I'm stitching it hard right now. But Brock Purdy,
man.
I'm still waiting about that jacket. I'm not convinced the jacket's going to come. I wouldn't be shocked, but my gut feeling probably says maybe no jacket. We'll see. I just want to say that I have not called Brock Purdy a Hall of Famer on this show. I have called many guys that have not gone that far. I know we just disagreed, and we might disagree on who's going to win this game. But I actually 100% agree with everything you said. I'll give a couple numbers. Eagles third in total offense this year. Niners fifth. Eagles third in points. Niners sixth. But again, about a 1.5 difference. Stats-wise, slightly better for the Eagles. But some of that could be due to Brock Purdy getting settled into the offense. Some of it could be, though, Minshew maybe in that Saints game. But I think it's pretty close. I think that the weapons are pretty even. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith versus Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. I might even argue that the Eagles guys might be slightly better. Goddard's really good. I might argue that Kittle's a little better. I do agree that McCaffrey is a little better than Miles Sanders. Also, Elijah Mitchell's really good. I know the Eagles have a good second guy too, but Mitchell's really good. So maybe the ever slight edge for the Niners as far as skilled players. I like Brock Purdy a lot. But obviously, Tom, unlike Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts has been consistent the whole season. I think that Jalen Hurts is a better runner. I think that Jalen Hurts is the better quarterback. I mean, I know we're talking about top quarterbacks in the league. I mean, Jalen Hurts this season is top 3 or 4 quarterback in the NFL. As much as I like Brock Purdy, I'm not ready to put him top 5 quarterback yet. I give the Eagles a very slight edge because Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and flipping it over to the defensive side of the football, this is another area where, I mean, I think the defenses are pretty dang near close in terms of talent. You'd probably give an edge to the Philadelphia secondary, but certainly Nick Bosa rushing off the edge has been absolutely phenomenal. I think most likely defensive player of the year, whereas Philadelphia does a lot of rotation. I think they're, I don't know where
first
they're ranked
in the NFL
exactly, but
Philly.
First in the NFL, but also first in the amount of rotations that they do on their defensive line. They have a lot of depth and use that to make up for the fact that they don't have necessarily a straight up and down Nick Bosa type of guy. But I mean, Hassan Reddick has been fantastic. Fletcher Cox is a great veteran on the interior line who can sometimes come off the edge. Graham is very, very good. And then in the secondary, Darius Slay has been absolutely fantastic for the Eagles coming over from Detroit. So I think this is pretty much even. Like, of all the different offense-defense matchups that we've talked about so far, I think this is about as close as it gets. I don't really know where to go on this one. Because Philadelphia on the season, there's 19.5 points a game. San Francisco, 16.5. Okay, so yeah, slightly different numbers. I'm not sure if these are factoring in. I think these are factoring in the playoff numbers as well.
What you're looking at, I'm looking at the regular season. Yeah. 20.2, Niners 16.3.
Yeah, which makes sense because only gave up 7 points in the last game. This one, ever so slight an edge to Philadelphia, I think.
Really?
But it's really, I don't even feel that comfortable saying that, to be honest with you. I think that they're so neck and neck even. I mean, Fred Warner is amazing. We saw him make some great plays where he would be kind of like,
I'm about to tell you why the Niners defense
up on the front line of scrimmage and then dropping back into coverage. I mean, I can go either way. Literally flip a coin, call heads and tails, and whatever it lands, I'll say, yeah, they have the better defense. But it's that close for me.
It's close, Tom, but I think there's, to me, I don't want to say they're much better, but I don't think it's as close as you're putting it. Look, San Francisco this season allowed about 4 points less per game. They had the number 1 scoring defense and the number 1 total defense. Eagles, ironically, second in total defense. Did it allow quite a bit more points, though? 7th with 20.2. San Francisco forced 30 turnovers. The Eagles 27. Slight edge to the Niners there. Philly did lead the league in sacks. But overall, the big difference to me in these two defenses is the linebacking core. Not only Fred Warner, also Dre Greenlaw is really good. I think the Niners have better linebackers, better guys to get those tackles. Bosa's still the best player on the field on either team on defense, the most reliable. I mean, he's the second best defensive player in the NFL because TJ Watt is easily the best. TJ Watt just missed time to injury, but because TJ Watt was out, Bosa led the league in sacks. Bosa will be defensive player of the year, but I do like San Francisco's linebackers better. And I think that you kind of look at the yards, and a lot of the stats are pretty similar. But then you do look at 16 points allowed for San Fran, 20 for the Eagles. What does that tell me? The Niners are better in the red zone. They're better at, I can't really say bend but not break because they allowed the least yards in the NFL. But I think they're really good at holding you to field goals. Dallas had really good field position multiple times in that game. They held them to field goals. I think San Francisco's got better linebackers. They do have the better overall defense. I'm not saying that it's by a lot, but I do think that it's, for me, definitely clearly the better defense. I don't think it's as close as you're putting it, just because, 4 points is fairly significant. A 4-point difference, points per game, and total defense matters a lot. But, how many points you allow is, for me, the most important metric. And the Niners are far and away number one, not like by a ton, but no one's within like a point of them. They've been number one the whole season. So I do think San Francisco has the better defense in this matchup.
Yeah, and that brings us to the intangibles, be it coaching, special teams, etc. I know Jake Elliott, Robbie Gould, both really good kickers. So if you need to get 3 points, or if you just need to count on your guy to get you that 1 point on the extra point kick, I think that they're pretty solid there. And of course, two coaches, Kyle Shanahan, again, longer resume than Nick Sirianni, but this year both have done really impressive jobs. So is there anything that jumps out as an X factor? And if so, where do you find a little bit of an edge?
Yeah, again, it's pretty close here as well. Both coaches are fantastic. I do think it's interesting that Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts meeting for the first time since college. Oklahoma, Iowa State, they both put up huge numbers, like 5-6 touchdowns each. Oklahoma winning by 8 points. So that's a kind of interesting little side bit. Nick Sirianni is a great coach. I think Kyle Shanahan is a slightly better coach, but it's so hard to compare because both guys, they run a very interesting system because they do rely a lot on running the ball, and they have a lot of like schemes to run the ball. These teams are actually kind of like a mirror image of each other in many ways because they have tons of really good weapons on the outside, but they're actually a little bit more of running teams as opposed to passing teams. So it's like they could shred you with the pass, but prefer to run the ball down your throat. So it's actually very similar schemes, and they're going up against, in many ways, very good and similar defenses. These teams are very similar. They beat you running the ball, playing great defense, good special teams, great coaching. But when they need to, they also have the weapons to air it out. So it's a very similar team. I think that maybe the ever slightest edge to Philly on intangibles just because they're at home in this game. I do think, though, I don't know. I'm not inside these guys' heads, but I do get the feeling with Brock Purdy, he's got less pressure on him. He's not supposed to be here. And that's not to say that there's not some pressure on him, because I do think Brock Purdy in many ways is playing for the starting job in San Francisco and playing for a starting job if San Francisco doesn't want to go with him. With that said, though, Jalen Hurts was an MVP candidate. I think there's a little bit less pressure on Brock Purdy. I do think that in its way is a better intangible. We can argue that Jalen Hurts played in a lot of big games, but then I could argue that he did get taken out of the national championship game. Was that maybe he wasn't terrible as a Georgia defense, but Tua was clearly better in college. So I don't know. Can Hurts handle the pressure? Because I think there is pressure on him in Philadelphia, more pressure on him than Brock Purdy. So I'm thinking more and more now that I'm thinking maybe San Fran does have the intangible just because of their quarterback kind of playing, Shanahan's been there. That's another help for San Francisco.
Sure.
At least your head coach has been there. Very close again. I think we look at these matchups in both conference championship games. Offense, defense, special teams, coaching. They're all close on these teams. It's super close. These games, both are super close. All four teams left are super close. I'll say a slight edge, actually, on San Francisco now that I talked myself into it.
Well, they're going to be at home, and I think that the coaching is going to be the intangible for the Eagles in winning this one, because Jonathan Gannon, the defensive coordinator, he has a lot to work with on the defensive side of the ball, and he's going to have to strike that right balance between guarding against whatever creative, stuff Kyle Shanahan's going to scheme up this week for Philadelphia, and then on the inverse side of things, finding a way to force Brock Purdy to make a long play decision. And what I mean by that is a lot of the 49ers offense is schemed up to be quick hitting routes, predetermined of where the ball's going to go. And what the Eagles are going to have to key in on is, okay, let's get the 49ers into, a third and long situation, get them behind the first down stick, so to speak, and try to make Brock Purdy make the correct decision when trying to read an entire field, as opposed to having a preset script and play of where he's going to go. I think that the coaching is going to be significant because Purdy so far has shown not intimidated by playing at the NFL level, not intimidated by playing in the NFL playoffs. I know there were a couple of rookie things that he was doing from the game. I know there was the one where he threw the ball away, and Greg, I think it was at the end of the first half as they were trying to get points or something along those lines. And Greg Olsen said he needs to throw it to the near sideline because when he throws it to the far sideline, the clock does not stop until the ball lands out of bounds, not when it crosses the out of bounds barrier. And it's little details like that that maybe Purdy doesn't have quite down just yet, which is totally fine because he's a rookie, but that might be that slight difference. And if Gannon is able to scheme up a couple of, big pressure rushes to either break a play that San Francisco is trying to run or simply put pressure on Purdy and force him to make a mistake, because as much as I said that Dallas's defense was a step over what Purdy was seeing earlier or toward the end of the regular season as a starter, I think that Philadelphia is another step above that, both in talent and in creativity. So it's going to be, can he read NFL coverages? Can he read what Philadelphia is disguising? I think that's going to be the key X factor matchup, is defensive coordinating from Philadelphia against what Kyle Shanahan's coming up with. I give a slight edge simply because Purdy is still a rookie. And yes, he's played admirably with all the caveats. He's played well for a rookie, for a seventh round draft pick.
He's played well for anybody, Tom. He's played well for anybody.
I think
his
that
passer rating is in the top half of the NFL. He's played well for anybody.
But I think that if Brock Purdy were, say, a second or third round quarterback, if he had had the entire season, people would be saying, "Oh, he's dealing with the rookie wall." I think the narrative around him changes if we switch up what his resume is. I agree that he has played well, but I think that's partially inflated by the fact of all these other things that are behind him that he has, of being seventh round pick, yada yada.
You and I disagree about him. Again, I think he's a lot better player than you think. I'll put that. I don't think that Brock Purdy is a liability. I think that he's a quarterback. I'm not saying maybe. I know you have the whole win despite of, win because of. He's right on the border for me, win because of or win with. But his team is good enough that they can win with them.
Clearly win with,
sure.
Yeah.
I would
win
say
because
clearly.
of is a very narrow, is a pretty narrow category. Patrick Mahomes is a win because of. I'm not putting Brock Purdy anywhere in the same conversation as Patrick Mahomes. I guess we got to pick winners in this one.
Yeah, let's go.
I imagine we're going to go right along where we said right at the beginning of the playoffs. I'm going with Philadelphia in this one. I have that as Eagles 23, 49ers 16. I think this is going to be a low-scoring affair because the defenses are really, really good. Both teams are pretty healthy on that front. So I think that there's going to be a lot of kicking that football back and forth and battling for field position.
I mostly agree. I do have the Niners winning 23-20, though. I'm going to disagree on who wins the game. I do expect it to be a little bit lower scoring. I was actually even thinking 2017 originally, but then I'm like, you know what? There is a lot of talent on offense in the NFL lately with how the rules are done. Great offense does beat great defense. That's why I settled at 23-20. But I think one thing we're talking a lot about Brock Purdy and what can he do. Obviously, I'm very high on Purdy. You're not as high. Jalen Hurts is phenomenal, but this season, when the games have been close, Jalen Hurts has not been as good. Philadelphia succeeds when they get ahead early and they can coast the rest of the way. You want to make Jalen Hurts beat you with the pass. The Niners allowed just under 78 rush yards this season. Their run defense is phenomenal. I think they're going to disrupt the Eagles' offense. They'll make Jalen Hurts into a passer.
Yep.
You're talking about making Brock Purdy into a long field passer. I'm talking about making Jalen Hurts into a pocket passer. He looked good last week. We'll see if there's any sort of injury left out there. The Niners will take advantage. I actually think, like, for me, the biggest difference in this game, Tom, is that I think the edge in defense is a little bit more significant than you think. The Niners defense is phenomenal. I think San Francisco finds a way to win 23-20 because of their defense, because they make Jalen Hurts look like an average quarterback. I know he's better than average, but they've made a lot of quarterbacks look average, even the good ones, except for Patrick Mahomes, who absolutely shredded them, and that's why he's the best. That's why the Chiefs still win the Super Bowl. But I'm going to go with the Niners in this game. I was 4-0 last week. I couldn't believe it. 4-0 picking conference championship games. Not quite as good betting against the spread, but 4-0 straight up. I think you were 3-1, right?
Yeah, because we differed on Bengals Bills. Yeah. Well, speaking about spreads, quickly we'll go through our a recap of the locks of the week, and then a quick hitter on what we've got coming up this week. I'm going with an all NFC or not NFC, an all conference championship card.
Same.
But how did we do?
You did amazing, Tom. You killed it. 3-0. 3-0, Tom Castleman, Bengals plus 5.5.
Thank you, Doug Peterson, for the backdoor cover.
That's right. I knew it was going to happen, by the way. I knew it was going to be a backdoor cover, but I couldn't bring myself to bet against the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm.
You had Bengals plus 5.5. They won outright. Jags plus 8.5. Got the backdoor cover. Giants, Eagles under 48.5. 38-7, 45 points. You were 3-0. I should have gone with the Niners to cover. I was thinking between Niners and Giants. I definitely missed the Giants covering. They got blown out big. I did have the Bengals covering, and I had a little NBA action. Mavs minus 2.5 over the Hawks. Hawks did win the game, so I was 1-2. You were 3-0. What you got this week, Mr. 3-0 Tom Castleman?
Well, I've got something that I feel pretty good about being 3-0 again, if only because the lines have moved a bit in my favor. I'm going to take the Bengals covering 1.5. I think initially they were a 2-point underdog. Unfortunately, that moved against me. That was the one that moved against me. I'm going to go with Bengals minus 1.5. We're still not quite certain about Patrick Mahomes' health. And if I already picked the Bengals to win, 2 points, I'll go ahead and take that, because let me see.
I'm seeing them at -1 in the updated lines, by the way.
-1. Interesting. Yeah. Let's see. Let me refresh Bovada, because that's where I get all of my stuff. It has -1.5 at -105 as the cost, or just outright to win at -120. So you know what? I'm not going to Mickey Mouse around. I'm just going to say Bengals money line in that case, because at -120, that falls decent enough within our range. Give me the Eagles to cover 2.5. Like I said, I really like their defense going up against Brock Purdy. Certainly, that's going to be a key matchup. And then, as I said, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game because we're having two great defenses. The line actually, or the over-under moved up a point. It was at 45.5. I have it at 46.5 now. So I'll go ahead and take the under on that front. Unders, I believe, were 4-0 last week in the divisional round. I'm going to look for that trend to continue.
Is it 46.5, you said?
46.5 is the over-under.
And I had 23-20. Okay, so that's under. Okay.
So if you want to tail along.
I'm thinking about it because we are going opposite the other way. So one of us is going to have a really good week and the other one's going to have a horrible week. Mm-hmm. So I will take my +1 on the Chiefs, by the way. I'm seeing it at, I don't know what Bovada's updated, but I've got an app that shows me all like the big sports books, PointsBet, Caesars, BetRivers, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Barstool. They all have the Chiefs at +1 at -110. So in the off chance Kansas City loses by 1, I'll take my wash. I'll go Chiefs +1. I don't see Mahomes and Andy Reid losing 4 times in a row to a team. They'll make adjustments. They're too good. They're too smart. Kansas City actually played just as good, if not better, earlier this season in the matchup. They played just as good, if not better, in the AFC title game last year. It was a simple case of more turnovers. They'll clean it up. I think that the Bengals' horrible offensive line against the number 2 team in the NFL in sacks, Kansas City Chiefs, Chris Jones, he'll eat. He'll put Burrow on the ground a couple of times. I think Kansas City at home with the best player in the world, the best quarterback in the world, Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, the best tight end in the world. They get it done. Chiefs win outright, but for our betting locks, I'll put +1 on that one.
Sure.
So I'm going the other way on the football game as well. Let me see the updated lines. I'm seeing 2.5 across the board. Is that what you have it at? 2.5 for the Eagles.
2.5, yeah.
So I have 49ers +2.5. I think the Niners are going to win outright because they have the better defense, as we just talked about. That defense will find a way to shut down Jalen Hurts. Purdy makes enough big plays. Look, I have San Francisco winning outright. So 2.5 points makes me feel good. So I might even bet that money line. We'll see. I'm thinking about putting all my money all in on the Chiefs and making one huge bet this weekend instead of spreading it around. So I was eyeing the under in the Eagles-Niners game. I do agree with it. But I don't like unders. I'm going to go with the over in the Chiefs game instead. Chiefs-Bengals over 47 points. That's what I have written down, Tom. I had 4 written down. I was torn between picking either the under in the NFC or the over in the AFC. I'm going to go with the over in the AFC just because it's more fun. Over 47 points. Previous 3 meetings all went over that total. They actually went all over 50 points. I think it was like 51, 65 last 3 meetings. Mahomes and Burrow, 2 best quarterbacks in the NFL. They want to show off their arms. Great weapons around them. Should see a lot of points. I don't believe there's any snow in the forecast. I don't believe there's any rain in the forecast.
Nope.
Last I checked.
Just cold and some moderate wind. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that we should have a lot of points in this game. Chiefs, Bengals over 47 points.
Awesome. So we'll go over to trivia really quickly. We might end up having the same trivia because this is championship round related.
We won't have the same one.
Oh, okay. So there have been, Brock Purdy is going to be the 5th rookie quarterback to start in a conference championship game. Can you name the other 4? I don't think any of them actually won and went on to the Super Bowl. I'm going to pull it up and look as you start guessing.
Ben Roethlisberger?
He is one. That was in 2004.
Didn't they win? I thought he won. I could be wrong. All right, Ben Roethlisberger's won.
Nope, lost. So he lost to the Patriots, or the Steelers lost 41-27 in the 2004 AFC Championship game.
That's what it was. All right, so Roethlisberger's won. I actually didn't see this graphic, so I'm going to have to do the whole guessing game because a lot of times I see the graphics. So Big Ben is one. Terry Bradshaw?
Not Terry Bradshaw.
Joe Namath?
Nope. All of these are within our lifetime, and most of them are guys that we were old enough to see and be fans.
Okay, so I physically remember Roethlisberger in the AFC title game as a rookie. Was Colin Kaepernick a rookie?
No, not when he was in the championship game.
Okay. Not Eli. I'm trying to think of recent. I mean, Tom Brady, was he a rookie or was he second year?
I believe he was second year.
Yeah, I think it was like his first year of playing. Mahomes also was his first year of playing because they didn't go to the AFC title game his rookie year. He was the backup. Not Peyton Manning. He wasn't great. I mean, he was good, but they weren't great right off the bat. Dan Marino.
Not Dan Marino.
Oh, he was like second year too, I think. Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was second year also, wasn't he?
Yep. So we've got one quarterback who was before Ben Roethlisberger in 2004 by a couple of years. And then these other 2 quarterbacks were after Ben Roethlisberger.
Ooh. Okay, so there's 5. Is Purdy count as one of them or no?
Yeah. Purdy's the 5th. So there've been 4 others who have done it. So you got Big
I need
Ben.
3 more. So
and it's tough because these guys did not play in the Super Bowl, so it's difficult to remember.
Mark Sanchez,
correct, in 2009 lost 30-17 against the Colts.
Matt Hasselbeck.
Not Matt Hasselbeck. No.
Russell Wilson.
Nope. This guy started for his franchise for a long time, eventually won a Super Bowl with his team, but was drafted after Joe Flacco. Yeah, lost 23-14 to the Steelers, actually. And then the last guy, I wouldn't have gotten him, and I'm not sure if you will.
I will. Dante Culpepper.
Not Culpepper, no.
Okay.
Played in the NFC. Trying to think what other clues to give.
Randall Cunningham.
Not Randall Cunningham, no. This team won the Super Bowl a couple of years after, but he wasn't the quarterback anymore. Somebody else was. So even if you get the team that won, it was within our lifetime. Not a Bronco. Like, I'm trying to think, like, what other hints might be good to give.
All right, just give it to me.
It was Sean King.
Oh, yeah.
For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah.
Lost of all scores 11-6 to the Rams in the year that they had the tackle. Yeah, that was the tough one. Like, enough guesses, you get Big Ben, you get Joe Flacco, Mark Sanchez, or Sean King, long enough back and not as extensive a career that that certainly no issues in missing that one. What do you got for me?
So there's a theme to the show. I'm talking of Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes is number one all time in career regular season and playoff passer rating. Who is number two all time in playoff passer rating? Tom Brady, by the way, Mr. Overrated Tampa Tom, 20th all time in playoff passer rating.
Oh, good Lord. All right, second in playoff passer rating.
And I'll give you one clue here. Most of the top 10 are all modern players. There is one exception. It's this guy from way back in the day. Way back in the day. Because I don't want you to list off all the modern guys. We would never have seen him play. Not even close to seeing him play.
Not even close. Okay. So now I'm going to have to go back into the football history books that I used to read that were a lot of fun. So I'm going to start off with Bart Starr for the Packers.
Boom, right there. Right off the bat.
Oh, wow.
Bart Starr. Nicely done, Tom. Yeah, number two all time in playoff passer rating.
Wow.
Let me give you a bonus question real quickly, because you got that one.
Yeah.
So Mahomes was number one. I believe he was number one in playoff passing yards per game, but because he missed some of the game, his average went down. Number one playoff passing yards per game, NFL history. This is a more modern guy.
More modern.
But not active.
Modern, not active. Passing yard. Would it be Peyton Manning?
Nope. Prolific passer. Another one of my all-time favorite quarterbacks. I don't think I talk about him enough on the show. I don't think you know how much I love this guy back in the day.
Though.
I know.
Dan Marino? Elway? Steve Young?
Nope. Keep going. More modern than those guys. I do love Steve Young.
Favre?
Not Favre.
Oh.
He was a backup for Favre at one point.
Oh, so then Aaron Rodgers?
No, I think I don't even know if he was Oster or if it was the preseason. No, he was at one point a backup for Brett Favre. Very briefly.
Would it be Hasselbeck?
No.
He was on the Packers. Briefly a backup for Brett Favre.
I could give you a clue that would give it away completely. So I'm trying to figure this out. One of the most prolific passing quarterbacks of all time. Probably, I would say, the second most underrated quarterback ever. Him and Steve Young, to me, are both top 10 quarterbacks all time. I don't know if people acknowledge either as a top 10 all time. They're top 10 in my list. No question.
And he backed up Brett Favre briefly.
He's a Hall of Fame quarterback. It's a really good player. Former MVP, MVP of the league, Super Bowl MVP, Super Bowl champion. I think he played on 3 different teams, but he made the Super Bowl with 2 different teams. I think he played on 3 teams.
I'm really confused.
The leader of maybe the best offense of all time.
Drew Brees?
Nope. They had a specific nickname. Played with a couple great receivers, a great running back as well.
Oh, Kurt Warner.
Kurt Warner, yep.
I didn't know that he
I don't know the specifics. You may look this up after the show because it may have been that it was at training camp or because he wasn't even the backup. He was like the 3rd string guy, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So it was something like he was on the Green Bay roster at some point very briefly. So the details are a little fudgy. So don't quote me on the exact details. I know he was at one point with the Green Bay Packer organization in some capacity. I don't think he ever played a game for Green Bay, and I don't think he was the number 2 quarterback either, but he was on the roster, at least in the preseason roster or something. So
that's a heck of a swing and a miss there for talent evaluators. Statements of the week. Kidding. So I think I've got a pretty good one. NFL Coach of the Year finalists came out, and it is Brian Daboll, Kyle Shanahan, and Doug Peterson. And I got to say, Nick Sirianni should absolutely be one of the 3 finalists for Coach of the Year. And here's why. I get you. There's an argument for Brian Daboll and the whole he did more with less.
That's
narrative.
My Coach of the Year, by the way. You can't boot him. Boot someone else.
That's somebody. That's somebody. And I'll get to who we're booting. And I also get Kyle Shanahan and looking at what he's done with not 1, not 2, but 3 different quarterbacks, at least 2 of whom benefit greatly from the amazing collection of talent around them and the offense that Kyle Shanahan puts into play. So I can understand looking at what he's been able to do. And honestly, I even get the whole worst to first narrative with the Jacksonville Jaguars and Doug Peterson. I mean, picking up 6 wins from last year. They were 3-14 to 9-8 this year, going from last in the division to first, helping Trevor Lawrence develop. But that kind of loses a little bit of that argument loses a little bit of strength when you say putting in Doug Peterson over Nick Sirianni. Because let's look at the Eagles' resume and compare it side to side. The Eagles went from 9-8 last year to 14-3 this season, picking up 5 wins to Jacksonville's 6. But I would argue it's a heck of a lot harder to go from 9-8 to 14-3 than it is from 3-14 to 9-8. You're going to pick up some of those wins just on variance alone. And consider that also, Eagles 14-3. 2 of those games were Gardner Minshew starts. They were 14-1 when Nick Sirianni had his starting quarterback, as opposed to Doug Peterson, who had Trevor Lawrence for every single game. Now, I'm not saying that Nick Sirianni is my Coach of the Year or that he has to be the one who's voted as the winner, but he absolutely deserves to be a finalist when you look at the resume that he's put together. Yes, he has a ton of talent, but so does Kyle Shanahan. He's not getting dinged. And if we're looking at, what have they done with making a team jump in improvement from one year to another, 9-8 to 14-3, like I said, is just as, if not more so, impressive than 3-14 to 9-8, especially when you look at the quality of talent in each of those divisions. The NFC South, we were on the verge of an 8-9 losing season Titans team taking home that crown, as opposed to not 1, not 2, but 3 NFC East teams making it in the playoffs, and the Eagles being clearly cut better than the other 2 teams. So that's why he should at least be a finalist. I put him in there over Doug Peterson. I think it's a travesty that Nick Sirianni is not getting more attention for Coach of the Year.
I got to agree. It does feel weird that the coach with the best record. I mean, I think Brian Daboll is my Coach of the Year because I think he's done more with less than anyone. I'm on board with
that, yeah.
But Doug Peterson, part of that is how bad was Urban Meyer. Part of it is just how bad is the division, because Tennessee the year before was a much better team. They lost A.J. Brown. They lost Ryan Tannehill for much of the season. Derrick Henry even was injured at certain points. So I think that the Jaguars, Yes, they picked up wins because Doug Peterson is better than Urban Meyer, but they also picked up wins because that division is very bad. So I agree.
Yep.
Daboll's my coach of the year, but I'll put Sirianni over Peterson.
Same.
Agree on
Sure.
that one. My statement of the week, it's in keeping up with the show. So first off, I'll make the brief statement here. I've talked about it weeks in a row. I hate to say it, but I told you so. Joe Burrow's better than Josh Allen. But I will say, no matter, Joe Burrow's the number 2 quarterback in the NFL, as I've said for about the last 2 months. He's got the it factor. He's a guy you trust more. He's more consistent. But people are getting ready to label Joe Burrow as the best quarterback in the league if he beats Patrick Mahomes. That's what talk shows are saying, Tom. No matter what
they
happens.
Need the content. I know.
No matter what happens on Sunday, if Joe Burrow and the Bengals win by 30 points, Tom, I don't care. I do not base things off 4 head-to-head games. If we were basing things off head-to-head, then Eli Manning is better than Tom Brady, which is obviously not true. But you could say, look, on the biggest stage, the biggest game, Eli beat him twice. Joe Burrow doesn't have a Super Bowl yet. Joe Burrow doesn't have an MVP. Mahomes has 2 MVPs. He's already got a Super Bowl. He's got 2 Super Bowl appearances. He's got better stats despite. Think about Mahomes this season. It's not talked about enough. Look, I know Travis Kelce's there. I know Andy Reid's there. His receivers are pretty average, Tom, if not below average. Juju Smith-Schuster is his number 1 receiver. Juju is at best, I'm talking about at best, average for a number 1 receiver, if not lesser. You want Juju as your number 2 guy, realistically. What Mahomes has done with the talent around him, which is a lot of good players, a great scheme, but he's made so many of those guys better. He's the best quarterback in the NFL. He's got the stats, best stats all time, most yards passing, best passer rating, most touchdowns. He's got the it factor. He's got the side angle throws. He's got everything down. And if Joe Burrow and the Bengals beat an injured Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City for the 4th time in 2 years, that is not nearly enough for me to say that Joe Burrow's the best quarterback. I don't care what happens this weekend. It's a team game. It's a team game. If the Bengals as a team beat the Chiefs, and by the way, if Mahomes is hurt and it clearly shows, that is a valid excuse for why they lose, by the way. Health matters. You can't win if you're not healthy. I think all these guys want to say, oh, they're making excuses for him already. It is a legitimate excuse. Are you kidding me? It's the conference championship game. If you can't run, it's a legitimate excuse. So my statement, I don't care what happens this weekend. Mahomes is number 1 quarterback in the NFL. Joe Burrow's number 2. Nothing, and I mean nothing, can change it. 6 interceptions for Mahomes, 6 touchdowns for Burrow. I'm not changing my mind. Mahomes number 1, Burrow number 2. That is the hierarchy in the NFL. Do you agree? I mean, I think you agree, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'd say so, yeah. Like if we're saying, hey, we're starting a franchise today, who's your first pick? Patrick Mahomes would be number 1.
And Joe Burrow number 2 or Josh Allen?
I like Burrow's feel. I'll go Burrow.
Okay.
It's a thought. I got to think about it, but I go Burrow slight edge. He's proven about. I mean, I don't like getting into the whole narrative of like, oh, proven winner. I mean, that's a function of a lot of different things that is not just about the quarterback.
He's a proven winner.
But he's clutch in the sense of he doesn't shy away from the big moment, that he is able to be himself when it matters most. And I think that's a key component of being a good quarterback, a great quarterback in the NFL.
Burrow is Brady 2.0. Mahomes is Mahomes 1.0. We've never seen anything like it. That's where I say that's my opinion on those guys. They're both fantastic, but Mahomes is next level. Longevity will matter, though. Longevity will matter for the GOAT debate. But I would
say, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, like maybe Patrick Mahomes is Aaron Rodgers 2.0.
He's better than Rodgers.
Like that's the closest. I know he's better. That's what the 2.0 part is. But like, I think that's the closest comparison because the style of quarterback that they are, as opposed to like Manning,
Sure.
Brady, Breeze,
Sure.
Rivers, who are just kind of like statues in the pocket.
And not
I
to say
think
that
I'm leaning
Rodgers,
closer to saying
not to say that Rodgers doesn't make some of the side angle throws. He does, but Mahomes makes a lot more passes Rodgers has never made. And Mahomes is a little bit more mobile as a runner. I know they both run two pass. Rodgers was mobile. Mahomes a little bit more mobile. But anyways, I think it's been a long show, Tom. I know you got work to do.
It has, yeah.
I got to get ready. So I'll let you go. Next week, I'm moving in with my girlfriend to our apartment. So we'll have no show next Wednesday. Thank you, Tom. We'll have a show in 2 weeks where we'll preview the Super Bowl, which is crazy to think about. Couple of things to keep in mind real quick. We'll probably get into this at some point in the weeks to come. LeBron James on the cusp of breaking Wilt Chamberlain's scoring record. Novak Djokovic on the cusp of tying Rafael Nadal for tennis majors. So some news and notes that I just want to briefly mention. But overall, great show, Tom, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.